What is up, YouTube? And today we're going to be talking about if you guys should be pulling or if you guys should be skipping the two banners that are currently running in the Covenant banner rotation, featuring Kane, the new Fire Warrior with his new artifact Tyrant's Descent, as well as Cecilia, the Fire Knight, with her own artifact Rise of a Monarch. We're going to be talking about both these units and their artifacts and if they're worth pulling for or buying with Powder of Knowledge respectively, and where they are good in. So first, let's start with the new unit Kane. This unit will be running for 2 weeks. Let's actually talk about his skills very briefly before we actually talk about him because he is a new character. So his S3 is a single target attack that gives him a greater attack buff or gap for 2 turns. And this damage will actually scale with the number of debuffs on the target. So the higher amount of debuffs, the more damage this will do. And you can actually soul burn this to reduce the cooldown from 4 turns to 2 turns. And this will gain 50 fighting spirits. You can see that he uses a fighting spirit mechanic. His S2, at the start of the first battle, you gain 50 fighting spirits. So after you start the battle and then you S3, you'll be at 100 right away. And upon receiving lethal damage, you'll get immortality and vampirism for 1 turn and reset the cooldown of your S3. So he has like a built-in Kron S2 with vampirism, so he can actually heal up as well once he gets hit low, and his S3 will reset. And after an ally attacks, if the target is inflicted with bleed, he'll gain 10 fighting spirit, and after an ally attacks when fighting spirit is full, you will use all that fighting spirit to enrage for 2 turns. In enrage, you can see at the bottom here is an undispellable buff that will give you attack and speed by 10%. Next we have his S1, single target attack that inflicts bleeding. When you have this rage effect granted from your S2, you will actually ignore effect resist. And also activate Rock Smash as an extra attack. Rock Smash is an AoE attack that will actually dispel 1 debuff from the caster. So yeah, looking at his kit, it's pretty obvious. He is designed exclusively for Rift. He has that S3 scaling attack on debuffs that will work very well with how Rift you want to stack debuffs anyways to reduce the damage. Makes him very good with units like Haste and Cirilla that stack bleeds. And yeah, his S2 works very well with bleeds as well because you're going to see after an ally attacks, if the target is inflicted with bleed, you'll gain fighting spirit. So just like a perfect unit to synergize with those Rift units. And also his S1 will inflict bleeding himself, so you can activate his S2 without the help of other units, and this AoE attack is very nice as well. Yeah, in theory it looks like he'd be very good for Rift, right? His kit is literally built for Rift, but after testing him out, a lot of people have noticed that he does less damage than every other damage dealer out there that can be used for Rift in his spot, right? So Milim, Jacko, Mercedes, all 3 of those units are DPS units that shouldn't be better than Kane, honestly, but they are. They actually will do more damage than Kane in every single fight. And Mercedes is a free-to-play unit, actually, so there's no real reason to pull Kane, right? And because of that, there's not really a reason to use him at all because his kit is only designed for Rift. He's only going to be used for Rift, but he's better than other units. I think Smilegate really missed the ball on this one. They made this unit to try to get people to pull for him because he is going to be very good for Rift. And they're trying to bait people into pulling for him because without testing him on first glance, he looks like he is the best Rift damage dealing unit. But after people have tested him, he's actually not as good. So you definitely don't even want him. And he's just completely useless. And I think he actually needs like a buff or a hotfix because, yeah, why would a unit that is designed for Rift only be not even the best unit, right? I think Smilegate didn't really test him out compared to other units. And yeah, he's just currently not worth it. But if he does get buffed, I'll make another video in the future about it. Because right now in his current state, not used at all in PvE. You can use him in Rift actually technically, but you might as well use Mercedes, who everyone has built because she does more damage. And in PvP, he's not really used at all. He's just like a cigarette basically for PvP. That's even worse, right? Because he doesn't get that extra turn or extinction. But yeah, not really good at all. Now for his artifact, Tyrant's Descent. When attacking, will increase damage dealt, and you get more damage for debuffs on the enemy up to 24%. This one's pretty decent for Rift, actually. If you have a warrior on your team like Jacko that you're using, this can be good. Although Jacko's artifact might be better because of the fact that it will give you actually effectiveness as well. But this is limited, right? So you might not have a lot of copies, whereas Tyrant's Descent, you might be able to get multiple copies of. But if you're just buying this from the Powder Knowledge shop and you already have Jacko's symbol, probably not worth it, honestly. So I'd say that this artifact's not really worth purchasing either because, yeah, you might as well just use Jacko's symbol or just other artifacts that will boost your damage against Rift bosses. I think there's another one as well that is going to be used. I think if I can find it, it's one of the event ones here. Give me like 1 second. Here we go. It's a 4-star Our Beautiful Seasons. This just gives you 20% extra damage, works against Rift, so that's probably better than this as well because you probably won't have this maxed out. So yeah, I think this artifact is not really worth it either, but in some situations, maybe like Ancient Inheritance, you might want this, but generally for Rift, not going to be too powerful. Honestly, there's just a lot of better options, so kind of worth skipping this artifact as well. Yeah, now talking about Cecilia, guys. So Cecilia, she is a pretty good knight for PvE. Not really used in PvP at all. She's mostly going to be used in like Light Expedition and Earth Expedition. Also Nightmare Raid for some bosses. You can use her, and she's also going to be pretty decent for Rift as well because you have a defense break. The only thing is, for Rift, there's just better options, right? For Rift, she's good because she has a defense break at 100% chance with her exclusive equipment. She also has that nice decreased attack and also a nice barrier for herself. But the thing is, there's just better defense breakers, namely Haste. If you have Haste built, he's just way better. He does defense breaking. He puts bleeds on to make the boss do less damage. He also does a ton of damage himself. There's Cirilla, if you want to use her, she's pretty decent as well. I even think Balance on is better because Balance on can do more damage as well. So Cecilia, not really good for Rift. For Expedition, she used to be the best of the best tanks because for Light Expo, she just gave you really high scores. For Earth Expo as well. However, with Brieg out, not really the best anymore. Brieg kind of just is better than her in Light Expo because he has way more consistent defense breaks. He has a decreased speed buff, debuff, which is very good because in Expedition, you're limited to a certain amount of turns. So you get more turns off this way. You have built-in effectiveness in his S3. You have a barrier for your entire team, which will help them in Light Expo a lot. You also get more stats. You get crit chance, crit damage. And you also have an S1 that hits pretty hard, will CR boost himself so you can cycle faster, and his S1 can actually activate his S3 as well to keep that defense break and speed down on the boss permanently. He's just way better than Cecilia for Light Expo, and he's the best Expo tank besides like Earth Expo, right? In Earth Expo, you can use Cecilia, but most people will still use like Adventure Ross there, so not even required. Adventure Ross is free to play anyway, so Cecilia, not really a reason to pull her just for Earth Expo, honestly, because that's the only area of content where she's very, very good now compared to Brieg. I guess if you don't have Brieg and you're looking for a Light Expo tank, Cecilia is the best second place unit besides him. But Adventure Ross is also very good there as well, so you can use Adventure Ross instead of Brieg and still be fine. Cecilia has definitely lost her value over time. I think she's power crept, which is kind of funny because just before Brieg came out, she was very popular in PvE. The only areas of content where she's very, very good now is like Nightmare Raid, but even then, there's a lot of options you can use instead of her. There's no area of content where you actually need her for PvE, and in PvP, she's not even usable. So yeah, similar to Kane, right? The same argument, like she is good in some areas of content, so maybe you want to pull for her, but she is replaceable and has better options, so not really worth your bookmarks. Like how Kane is good in Rift, but not the best option, so not really worth the bookmarks either. But yeah, let's talk about her artifact though really quickly. Rise of a Monarch. Increases defense of all allies by 10%, similar to how Aureus works, but instead of Aureus giving that damage share, you'll have at the end of the turn grants a barrier equivalent to X amount of the caster's max health for 2 turns to the ally, except for the caster with lowest health. So basically, you're going to grant a barrier to the lowest health ally on your team based on the holder's HP, and you're going to see that it does give you 10% all defense, which is the same as Aureus. It's just that the secondary effect is different, and honestly, Aureus is way better because, yeah, it's just better because Knights usually have way more health and can soak more damage. They also usually have barriers built in, which will work with Aureus as well. So you're just getting way more value and damage mitigation off of the Aureus artifact. Also, Rise of Monarch only will protect one unit with that barrier, not everyone, so not really worth it. Very similar to how Fallen Cecilia's S2 works, which is still decent, but compared to other Knight artifacts, I don't think it's really that great because you're competing with like Aureus for mitigation, Adamant Shield for mitigation, Elber's Ritual Sword for damage dealers. If you're another damage dealing Knight that wants to actually crit and do more damage, you have Mature Sunglasses, right? So a lot of good Knight artifacts out there, like Rocket Punch Gauntlet for defense scaling ones, right? So I don't really think it's worth it. It's a decent artifact, especially in Guild Wars, if you want to surprise some people on defense teams, but not really worth it overall, especially if it's 240 powder, right? Because if you're purchasing this, it's going to be 240. Not worth it. I think it's more of an artifact where if you randomly pull it and you get multiple copies, limit break it out, and you want to use it, then sure. But I would definitely recommend spending my powder on that artifact. But yeah, just to summarize very quickly, yeah, Kane was meant to be like a one-trick unit for Rift, but he's just terrible there. Like, it's been tested by multiple people. I actually was going to pull him. I didn't pull him. I was going to pull him, but I woke up in my Discord and also my guild Discord. Everyone's like, this unit sucks. He's doing less damage than like their Millims or their Jackos or their Mercedes. And even some content creators also already tested him out and saw the same results, most of them. So I was like, oh, okay. probably not that great. And it's very obvious what his best team comp is, right? You just want to stack a lot of debuffs, especially bleed. So people are running him with like Surin and Haste. It's like the same thing. So I don't really see a reason to pull for him because, yeah, you might as well just use another DPS unit. Most people probably have Jacko from Guilty Gear or they have Milim from the Slime collab if you play during those collabs because both units are pretty decent. Or you can just use your Mercedes, which is a 4-star free-to-play unit that is going to do on average more damage than Kane. So don't really know why I pull for him then if he's going to do less damage than Mercedes and he requires a lot more investment because he's pure damage and Rift is about just doing as much damage as possible. Like you're going to want to skill enhance these, but yeah, I'm not really sure if it's worth it, right? Because I mean, it's definitely not worth it unless he gets buffed. And I think Smelgate needs to buff him. If he does get buffed, it might change the story a little bit, especially if you're trying to get into Rift. But Rift is like a late game piece of content anyways, and it's not really worth gearing units specifically for Rift because Rift units don't really get use anywhere else, right? And Mulgore is so important in this game. I only have like, what, 20 something, 27, so I can't even fully enhance a unit. So yeah, Kane is a unit that's only going to be used in Rift. Other units, right? Haste, Cirilla, Stern as well. Those units are only going to be used in Rift really. Jacko, very good unit, but she's collab. Milim, very good unit, but she's collab. Mercedes, very good unit. But besides those three, like most of the Rift units are just like a one and done thing. They're only going to be used for Rift. And when the season swaps to a different element, they're going to be useless. So if you build Kane, and sure, he's doing very well in Rift, if the season changes to like Ice or like Earth, you're not going to be able to use him until the season's back to Fire because he's only good for Rift from what it looks like. And it's just a waste of your investment. So I don't think it's worth investing in him. His artifact seems pretty decent, but there's a lot of good damage boosting artifacts out there. And it feels like this, like especially for the first few turns, might take some time to ramp up to that 18%. Whereas something like a Jacko symbol, you just need one debuff from the boss and you're just getting full damage, right? So not really worth it in my opinion. Cecilia, like I mentioned, not really worth it. She's power crept and her artifact is just way better options out there. So yeah, if you guys plan to pull, let me know what unit you're pulling for. If you guys do think Kane needs a buff, also let me know. If you think he's fine, let me know. I'm not really too sure. Actually, I am pretty sure because I've seen people using him. But let me know what your thoughts on Kane and what they should do to actually buff him. Should they just buff his damage? Or do you think they should buff something in his kit so that he can be used in other areas of content? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And I'll see you guys next video.